Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm pleased to rise on behalf of New Zealand First to take a call on this third reading of the Taxation Bright Line for Residential Land Bill. New Zealand First opposes this bill. Mr Speaker, there are any number of reasons why any party, in fact every party in this House, could and in fact should be opposing this bill. Our primary reason for opposing it, New Zealand First's primary reason, our primary objection, is that it quite simply will not work. As Mr Cosgrave said, this bill is a waste of time, and strangely that he did, it's put me in the rather odd position of being able to agree with Mr Bennett, who in a rare moment of cogency questioned why Mr Cosgrave and others from Labor would bag this bill and then vote for it anyway. I have to ask the same question. New Zealand First, of course, we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. We say the reasons why we're going to oppose the bill and then we oppose it. And you know, perhaps Labor could take a leaf out of our book rather than the other. But, Mr Speaker, as Mr Cosgrave said, the bill is a waste of time. It is a waste of time, money and effort. It does not acknowledge the underlying problems that affect residential property in New Zealand. It doesn't admit the obvious faults where they lie, and it doesn't address any of the root causes of discrepancies between supply and demand in any honest or effective manner. So this bill is not about a bright line test, Mr Speaker. It's about a dumb line test. It is a dumb bill which introduces a dumb regime that represents a dumb approach to what is a very real problem, and highlights the way that this government has tried and failed, I might add, because people haven't swallowed the line, to dumb down every aspect of the foreign ownership debate that it doesn't agree with. There are holes in this bill, again, as Mr Cosgrave noted, Mr Speaker, that you could drive a bus through. Well, I might suggest perhaps it should be a house bus, Mr Speaker, because housing, and more to point, the lack of it, is what this issue is all about, that this bill purportedly attempts to address. Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand have said that this bill is not sound tax policy. The Treasury itself have stated that it will not capture the speculator. And anyone happy to wait for 2 years and 1 day after buying a property before selling it again will not be inconvenienced by this bill either, Mr Speaker. Trusts and companies are exempt from it. Farmland and business premises are exempt from it. Foreign buyers, or in fact anyone who wants to land bank, who simply wants has a need to expatriate money from wherever they are in order to get it out of the reach of various authorities and other jurisdictions, who are not motivated necessarily by the prospect of short-term speculation, will not be affected by this bill, but the action of their purchase will nevertheless remove New Zealand residential properties from the reach of New Zealand buyers. The Minister of Finance himself has said that any transaction which is likely to be captured by this bill is very likely to already be liable for capital gains tax under existing legislation. So, Mr Speaker, this bill and the other related, rather limp responses that the government has belatedly brought to this House as a result of the multitude of increasingly loud voices protesting the sell-off of New Zealand, quite simply does not address the real issues, and because of that it quite simply will not work. Making foreign buyers obtain a New Zealand tax number, which a tourist here for the weekend can apply for and get, will not slow down the overseas speculator who is out to get their hands on New Zealand residential property. Making them obtain a New Zealand bank account, when no bank, not one of the commercial banks in this country, which are almost 100% foreign owned, no one is going to refuse to open an account for a foreign buyer who turns up with a fistful of dollars, or any other currency, come to that. So that's not going to slow them down. And neither is making them wait 2 years and 1 day before they clip the ticket on what is an ability to trade in New Zealand residential property that an overwhelming majority of New Zealanders quite simply don't want them to have in the first place. Mr Speaker, New Zealanders do not want foreigners buying our country. No one has any objection to immigrants who we choose to allow to come here buying a home to live in. But there is a world of difference between that and the kind of unbridled speculation and purchase that's been allowed under this and previous governments, where anyone at all, from anywhere at all, with access to very cheap 0% foreign finance, can come to New Zealand, or even not come here. They can get on the phone and buy any number of houses and properties that they like, frequently sight unseen, at whatever money the seller demands, at whatever money the market commands, and at prices that are beyond the reach of New Zealand citizens and permanent residents, first home buyers. New Zealanders don't want that, Mr Speaker, and the government's own supporters don't want that, and they have been saying so with increasing volume and increasing stridency. And this bill and others like it, the other measures that this government has brought in, are a rather half-hearted attempt to provide a sop to those concerns, and it won't work. Mr Speaker, The answer to what is this very real problem is to limit the purchase and ownership of New Zealand houses to New Zealand citizens and permanent residents who are exercising their permanent residency, and to no one else. As Mr Twyford mentions, his bill addresses this too. We're very, very glad to see that Labor has adopted this long-standing piece of New Zealand First policy, and when Mr Twyford's bill comes up, I'm sure our caucus will be only too keen to discuss it. Taking that action, Mr Speaker, will fix the supply and demand problems, and it will fix the looming Godzilla that is the Auckland housing bubble. This bill will do no such thing, Mr Speaker. For that reason, New Zealand First cannot and does not support it. Thank you.
Jamie Lee Ross.